In alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, assalamu alaikum sisters and brothers. I'm happy to be with you again with another Friday message, and I just wanted to share some thoughts and reflections on a few different stories from our traditions involving the prophets, peace be upon them, and their companions, their followers, and times of difficulty, times of struggle, and how that affects our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, I was moved to think about some thoughts to share today by reading a remarkable address that came from Pope Francis, actually, earlier during this crisis. And Pope Francis, you know, it's an amazing scene because he's giving this address to an empty St. Peter's Square, because, of course, Italy was one of the hardest hit early on with this crisis, which has continued to travel throughout the globe and continued to reach us. And he mentions, he has a beautiful way of describing how the crisis that has come upon us and the falling away of everything that we were sure of, everything that we were certain of, everything that we took for granted, has made us realize that we're all in the same boat together as a society, and has made us appreciate those people who contribute, who were contributing before, but we may have not noticed or may have taken them for granted, and should cause us to be more grateful for all that they do, and to be more grateful for all that we have, and all these other beautiful messages. But he was basing it around a story that's in the Gospels. And for people who know the Gospels are stories from the life of the Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. And so they're similar to what we would call sirah or hadith, in that they contain these stories and events in the life of the Prophet. And Isa alayhi salam, you know, generally we as Muslims, when we hear these stories that the people of the book tell about previous prophets, we don't say for sure whether they're true or not, but we can relate them and we can take lessons from them. But in any case, my point is more the story that caught my attention. And the Pope, the Bible talks about, in the Gospels, it talks about Isa alayhi salam. He goes out into this boat and he takes the Hawariyun, the disciples, with him into this boat. He's been preaching and he's tired, and they're going on a boat to go to the other side of the sea. And the boat, a storm comes upon them. And the storm comes upon them, and the boat begins to rock, and the sea is becoming wide. And the disciples, they begin to become concerned, and they begin to become clear that the boat is going to capsize, that they're going to be all drowned. And Isa alayhi salam, in the story, he's in the front of the boat, but he's sleeping this whole time. And what really caught my attention and reminded me is the mention that this is the only time in the Gospels where Isa alayhi salam is sleeping. And so he's sleeping through the storm. And eventually the disciples, they reach their breaking point, and they're out of their concern and worry, and so they wake him up and they say, "Oh teacher, do you not care if we die? Do you not care that we're about to perish, that we're drowning here?" And then Isa alayhi salam wakes up and he calms the storm with his words, we believe with the permission of God. And then he tells them, "Why are you afraid? Don't you have faith? Don't you yet have Iman?" And so it's a very striking story and a very striking image. But I began to think of times in the life of our Prophet ﷺ that may be similar. And what came to my mind was the hijrah with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So we know the hijrah is one of the most amazing incidents from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the momentous events in history of humans, of the Prophet ﷺ leaving his hometown, leaving the place that he loved, leaving what he said was the most beloved city to him on the earth, and being forced to flee out of it, as his uncle had told him he would be from the beginning of his message, and leaving. And of course, one of the beautiful things is Abu Bakr radiallahu an and his relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how they go on this journey together. And we know that our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to visit the house of Abu Bakr, and he had been preparing to go on the hijrah, had been preparing to go on the journey, and Abu Bakr's greatest hope in the world was that he would be allowed to go with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ was waiting for the command and the permission, the instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of how to undertake this journey. And so when the Prophet ﷺ said that it was the time to go, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he said, Suhba ya Rasulullah, will we be going together ya Rasulullah? Will I be your companion on this journey ya Rasulullah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, Suhba, together, we're going together. That Abu Bakr began to cry. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that I never knew, and she's still young at this time, she said, I had never knew that a person could cry out of happiness until I saw Abu Bakr crying out of how happy he was to be going with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the journey was so dangerous, and the people were coming to after the Prophet ﷺ, that we know that Abu Bakr, during the journey, he would be constantly moving around the Prophet ﷺ, and constantly, he said, I would worry that someone would come from the front, so I would go in front of him, then I would worry someone would come from the back, I would go back in him, then I would be worried about the side. So Abu Bakr was constantly worried and constantly saw that he wanted to be with the Prophet ﷺ so that he could protect him. And then they went to the cave. So the technique, they went to hide from the people that were coming after by going the opposite direction and staying in a cave and then going around. So they're in this cave, and of course we know the stories that are told about this time. And this is why I brought this up, because we know one of the stories that's told is, of course, the Prophet ﷺ is sleeping in the cave. He's sleeping in the cave of Thor, and Abu Bakr is staying awake to guard him and to make sure that he's okay. And Abu Bakr has put his foot over this little hole in the cave where he felt there were scorpions or snakes or other animals that could be harmful to the Prophet ﷺ. So he put his foot over it to try to protect the Prophet ﷺ. And then the story goes that the scorpion stung the feet of Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr didn't even cry out or anything because he didn't want to wake the Prophet ﷺ. But then the Prophet woke up from the tears of Abu Bakr, from the pain that were coming upon him. Radiallahu an. May Allah be pleased with Abu Bakr. And then when Abu Bakr talked to, as related in the hadith, when Abu Bakr turned to, and when the Prophet ﷺ turned to Abu Bakr, he says, Ya Abu Bakr, ma dhanuka bithnaini Allahu thalathahumma. What do you think, Abu Bakr, what do you think about two, and the third one with them is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then as Allah relates in the Quran, that He says to him, La tahzan, in Allah ma'ana. Don't be afraid, don't grieve, indeed Allah is with us. Indeed Allah is with us. فَأَنزَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَةُ عَلَيْهِ. And the sakina of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fell upon him. And the commentators of the Quran differ whether that sakina is talking about Abu Bakr or talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down His sakina upon them. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to Abu Bakr, La tahzan, in Allah ma'na. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His eternal speech in the Quran captures that for us. And that's the message for us in this struggle and in every struggle that we are in. La tahzan, in Allah ma'na. And what I always like to reflect about this beautiful ayah of the Quran is that one could imagine different ways of saying that. Just as we imagine the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, there are different ways that he could say, why are you afraid? Don't you have faith? There are ways that we could say, La tahzan inna Allah ma'na. One could be scolding, one could be reproaching, but one could be a beautiful way of saying with a smile, the way the Prophet ﷺ said, what do you think of two and the third is Allah? La tahzan inna Allah ma'na. One is encouraging and reminding and letting people know that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. And indeed we know that we have times when we break. We know we have times when we're afraid. We know we have times when we're like the companions of Isa alayhi salam and we can't take it anymore and we wake him up. We know we have times like Abu Bakr when the cave, when he turns to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he says, Ya Rasulullah, if they just look down at their feet, they will see us. If they just look down at their feet, they will see us. But we come to those breaking points. But we know that when we come to those points, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We encourage each other to turn to Allah. So we are at one of those times now. We are at one of those times where many of us have had the things that we took for granted, the things that we thought were safe and secure, have been taken away from us. And we have anxiety about the future. And we have anxiety about people whom we love. And some of us may even have anxiety about ourselves. And we don't know where to turn to. And we want to encourage each other to take it this time to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to turn towards Allah, to know that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. We are going to face difficulties in our lives. We're going to face crisis and struggle in our lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be gentle with us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not give us hardships that are too much for us or that we can't bear. But when we are in the midst of a hardship, when we are in the midst of a struggle, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to at least let us come out of that struggle having the experience of getting closer to Allah. You know, one interesting thing that we say about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an, as difficult as being on the hijrah with the Prophet ﷺ was, as dangerous as it was, as scared as he became, he was crying out of happiness to be able to go on it, not because he didn't realize how dangerous it was, but because he realized that even in that time it was blessed. And it was a time for him to get closer to the Prophet ﷺ, and it was a time for him to get closer to Allah. So these times of struggle for us can become blessed memories for us, and times that we look back on and say that amidst all the hardship, amidst all the struggle, amidst all the pain, there were also beautiful moments, and there were also times that we remember and we benefit from, because we realize how when we lost everything that we put our faith in, all the things of this world that we put our faith in, it made us turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It made us turn towards God and get closer to God. You know, Muslims, one of the things that we love to say, because it's a statement of the Prophet ﷺ and it's very true, is the idea that as Muslims we have tawakkul, but our tawakkul does not make us not take means in this world. So as the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel and then trust in Allah. So it's not a question of should you tie your camel up and secure it so it doesn't run away, or should you just trust in Allah. You should do both. And we see that Abu Bakr on the Hijrah is one of the beautiful examples of this, that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh took so many precautions to try to keep the Prophet ﷺ safe in the Hijrah, and to try to make to provide for the journey with all the means of this world. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet ﷺ is reminding Abu Bakr that at the end of the day, when you take all those precautions, you then have to place your trust in Allah. You have to place your confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one thing that we do when we say this sometimes, though, is that it can be difficult to do both with the fervor. So sometimes when we have all the confidence in ourselves, when we have confidence in maybe our wealth, when we have confidence in our privilege, when we have confidence in different things that we've taken for granted in this world, we may forget to make dua to Allah, or we may make dua half-heartedly, because we have confidence that all these things will get us what we want in this world. On the other hand, when those things are taken away from us, when what we thought we were sure in is taken away from us, sometimes we turn fervently to Allah. And that's why sometimes there can be a blessing in our trials and tribulations, because they make us turn to Allah, and they make us say dua with a passion, with an intensity that we didn't say at other times, because we've lost confidence in other things, and we only have our confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we want to be people, yes, that have our confidence only in Allah, that have our confidence and trust in Allah, but people who passionately can take the means and do everything we can to help others, and do everything we can to help our community, and still turn passionately to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and beg of Him in the nights that He protect us, that He protect all whom we love. And so not have one take away from the other, but have us, because we are faithful people who believe in as Allah instructed us, who believe in as the Prophet ﷺ instructed us, that we passionately embrace both. We passionately embrace our duty to serve others. We passionately embrace our duty to protect ourselves. And we passionately turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognizing that at the end of the affair, everything is in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we want to come out of whatever experience that we're in, whatever trial we are in, whether it's a trial of hardship or whether it's a trial of success and comfort. And sometimes those trials that we know are more difficult. But in both cases, whatever case that we're in, we want it to be something that makes us get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gets closer to us, to each other as believers, gets closer to us as ummah, as a community who believes in Allah, who trusts in Allah, and who struggles together to protect ourselves and to protect each other, having the full confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we'll just end by reflecting that the other story that I thought of when I've thought of the Prophet ﷺ and he's saying, La tahzan inna Allaha ma'ana, is the Bani Israel when they're with Musa alayhi salam and they're fleeing from Fir'aun. And this was another time where the companions of Musa alayhi salam, when his followers from the Bani Israel, they reached their own breaking point. They reached their own breaking point when they are running and they begin to see that the sea is in front of them and Pharaoh's troops are behind them. And they call, it says, Qala ashabu Musa inna la mudrakun. They said, the companions of Musa said, indeed, we're about to be overtaken. Indeed, they were about to be overcome. And they were calling out in desperation. Qala Musa alayhi salam, he says, Qala kalla inna ma'iya rabbi sayahdini. Never. Indeed, Allah, my Rabb, my Lord is with me and He will guide me. So when they reached that breaking point, Musa alayhi salam still had the confidence and trust in Allah, and he pointed out to them that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be with us and He will guide me to the way through. And then we know Musa alayhi salam parted the sea. So even when the situation looks impossible and the situation, we do not know what the future holds. We are trying to get through the immediate situation we're in now, and that will just open up a lot of other unknowns and uncertainties about the future that lies after that. But we know that we are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know if we have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He will guide us, that He will show us the way, that He is with us, and that we will come out of this feeling closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, feeling closer to each other, and having a better idea of where we stand with Allah, and hopefully more grateful for things that will get easier for us in the future. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easier for us in the future, to be with all of us who are vulnerable, to be with everyone who has lost work, to be with everyone who is unsure how to pay their rent, to be with everyone who is unsure about the future of their place of employment or their school or anything else. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware of what the future holds, but we are not. So we turn to Allah and we express our weakness, and we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we ask Him to help us. But we have trust in Allah. When we relate all these stories of the prophets and their people with them, we understand that even the companions of the prophets, even the best of people after the prophets, their companions, the ones who saw them and learned from them and struggled with them, they had these breaking point moments. So we do not have to look down on ourselves if we have these breaking point moments, if we have these points of desperation where we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we call out. But we just want to, when we have that desperation, always call out to Allah. Always call out to Allah, and we don't have to call in any other direction, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer us. For these stories prove to us and show us and remind us what many of us have experienced in our life, and I hope all of us will experience in our life as we go forward, that indeed if we are faithful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is always faithful to us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never abandons His people, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never let us down. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your families. I hope to talk to each of you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.